Imagine for a moment that, well, that you are starving in the desert, your lips are cracked, your skin is blistering, and your body is literally slowly cannibalizing itself for moisture.
Just a horrific way to go.
Right. And just as your vision starts to blur, you stumble upon a massive, ancient city completely swallowed by the dunes.
Which feels like a miracle.
Exactly. You think you're saved, but as you drag yourself through these sand-choked streets, you start to realize something terrifying.
Yeah, the wells are dry.
The wells are completely dry, the streets are empty, and, you know, the only thing worse than dying of thirst in the desert is discovering exactly what killed this city in the first place.
I mean, that is the ultimate bait and switch of history, right? The desert doesn't just hide things. It actively preserves the very horrors that caused a civilization to collapse to begin with.
Yeah, totally.
You step into a ruin hoping for salvation, and instead you just walk into a monument to society's darkest mistakes.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are reconstructing today in this deep dive. We are exploring the harrowing, honestly almost unbelievable true tale of 4 desperate travelers who stumbled into the lost city of Cynidicea.
And the ancient, unspeakable terror sleeping right beneath it.
Right, exactly. But before we get to our travelers dying of thirst, we really have to understand what they were walking into. Because Cynidicea wasn't always a dead city, right? I mean, it was a paradise.
Well, absolutely. In its first age, it was this absolute miracle of engineering. Imagine like a green wound cut straight into the endless waste.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a kingdom where the people engineered these massive subterranean irrigation channels. They forced grain to grow in a place where the sun actively tries to kill everything.
So they had like a massive surplus.
Totally. They had white walls, cattle grazing in the shade, huge date groves. I mean, merchants would cross half the continent just to trade for their glass, their dyed cloth, and this little blue stones that the Cynidicians polished until they looked like fragments of the sky.
That sounds beautiful. And at the absolute height of this golden age, you have King Alexander and Queen Zenobia.
Yes. Alexander is remembered as the last great king of Cynidicea.
Duh.
And, you know, in historical terms, being remembered as the last great anything is just never a safe title.
Yeah, that's a massive red flag.
Right. It usually means your society is standing right on the edge of a cliff,
Yeah.
and no one quite realizes it yet because, well, the treasury is full.
Right, everyone's comfortable.
Exactly. So when Alexander died, the kingdom possessed such immense wealth that they built him a monument. This massive 5-tiered step pyramid, so unimaginably large that the desert had to work patiently for centuries just to bury the lower levels.
Okay, wait, hold on. If they had this incredibly advanced irrigation system and, you know, they were wealthy enough to build a literal mountain of stone in the sand, what went wrong?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Like, why didn't they just keep expanding? You don't go from a paradise of white walls and date groves to a buried nightmare just because a king dies.
Well, you're right. The collapse wasn't economic at all. And it didn't come from the sky or some invading army. It came from underneath.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. While they were digging the foundations deep below this massive step pyramid, the workers struck something hard. They found older stone beneath the Cynidician bedrock.
Like ruins.
Basically. It was a shrine or some kind of foundation built by an entirely different ancient people who had hunted that desert long before the ancestors of Cynidicea ever even arrived.
And I'm guessing they opened it.
They did. And worse, they breached the seal of what was sleeping inside it.
Zargon.
Zargon. Now, there are monsters in myth that announce themselves with grand speeches or, complex demands. Zargon did none of that. Zargon simply rose out of the slime.
Oh.
Yeah, the historical records describe it as a physical nightmare.
Oh.
Taller than a man, eventually growing taller than 3 men. It had a giant lizard-like head, but no arms or legs.
Just tentacles, right?
Right. Just 12 massive, wet tentacles powerful enough to drag its immense, crushing bulk through the mud and the bones of its victims. And on its brow, curving upward, was one black horn. Right beneath that horn was a single staring red eye.
I mean, that is just viscerally disgusting. A 15-foot mass of tentacles and a lizard head that just crawls out of a hole in the ground.
It's pure horror.
But here is my question. Why didn't they just kill it? Or better yet, you just said they were masters of subterranean irrigation. Why not just flood the foundation, drown the thing, and build the pyramid somewhere else?
I mean, that is the logical response.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the panic of the moment and the arrogance of a society that thinks can control absolutely everything.
Right. Hubris.
Exactly. They couldn't drown it because the creature's lair was tied to deeper subterranean fissures. And when they tried to kill it, they just failed. The workers died first. Then the elite guards who were sent down to investigate were torn apart.
Oh, man.
Then the rulers started sending down condemned prisoners. Because, as is so often the case in collapsing societies, the rulers discovered religion right after practical cruelty failed.
So they realized they couldn't beat it, and instead of admitting defeat and abandoning the pyramid, they just decided to keep it fed so it wouldn't come to the surface.
Precisely. It is a textbook example of the sunk cost fallacy, but, applied to human life. Once you start sacrificing your own people to a monster in the dark, you are committing an atrocity.
Yeah, a massive one.
Admitting it's just a monster means admitting you murdered your own citizens for nothing. But if you call that monster a god, well, then those murders become sacrifices. They become holy.
That is incredibly dark. By defining it as a god, they just completely absolve themselves of the guilt of feeding it. And this causes a complete theological and societal collapse in Cynidicea, doesn't it?
Oh, a total sociological shift.
Yeah.
Before Zargon, the citizens of Cynidicea had this really complex pantheon. They worshipped Gorm, the stern, bearded lord of storms and justice.
Right.
They worshipped Dusemigaris, a winged child who is the god of healing messages and thieves. And they worshipped Matarua, the lady of birth, death, the turning seasons, and war.
Okay.
But here is the critical difference between those gods and Zargon. Old gods demand virtue.
Right, they ask people to become better than themselves. Like, Gorm demands you be just. Eusmegaris demands cunning. Matarua demands discipline.
Exactly. They require actual effort. Zargon only demanded to be fed. It didn't care if you were a good person, a just ruler, or a brilliant scholar. It just wanted meat.
Wow.
And for a society already wealthy and complacent, Zargon was just the path of least resistance.
It's like the ultimate lazy religion. And because of that, Cynidicea just hollows itself out from the inside. The society collapses into profound decadence. I mean, the records show their wine cellars deepened. The people began drugging themselves with these potent local narcotics, turning everyday life into just a continuous, endless festival.
Yeah, a total escape from reality.
Exactly. They started wearing elaborate masks. Birds, wolves, camels. Initially, these masks were just for holy days. But soon they became their second faces. They completely detached from the reality of their decaying world.
And the physical infrastructure mirrored their psychological decay perfectly. The irrigation ditches cracked, the army lost all discipline, the green fields died and literally turned back to yellow sand.
So the desert reclaimed it.
Right. So when the nomadic barbarians finally came over the walls centuries later, it wasn't really a war, it was an eviction. The invaders easily breached the city, but they didn't actually destroy Cynidicea. They merely finished the work the citizens had already started.
But the true horror is that the survivors of that invasion didn't flee into the desert. They retreated downward. They fled into the vast, dark catacombs beneath the pyramid, taking their masks, their drugs, and their endless dream state with them.
Down into the dark.
Yeah, they built an entirely new underground city in the dark, living in a perpetual fever dream, worshiping the very monster that had eaten their world.
Which brings us from the ancient tragedy to the immediate crisis of our four travelers. Because for decades, maybe centuries, Cynidicea has been entirely swallowed by the sand. It is nothing but a myth told to frighten children.
Until now.
Right, until four people who are having the absolute worst week of their lives stumble right into it.
Let's bring our protagonists onto the stage because we have four very distinct individuals who have been forced together by circumstance. First, there is Sarah Ilion. She is the pragmatist, the caravan scout. Her entire worldview is trained on looking for trouble before it happens.
Essential in the desert.
Completely. Then you have Bram Voss, the muscle, a warrior who prefers direct physical solutions to complex problems.
You also have Mero Quill,
Yeah.
a scholar and magic user,
Right.
who frankly complains about absolutely everything from the heat to the quality of caravan tea.
He sounds delightful.
Oh, very. And finally, Brother Lethan, a faithful cleric who tries to hold the group together with comforting sayings and religious proverbs.
Though at this point in the story, even Brother Lethan has stopped offering comforting sayings. Because they're dying. They were part of a massive merchant caravan that was completely obliterated by a catastrophic sandstorm 4 days ago.
Just wiped out.
Completely. The camels are gone, the supplies are buried, they are completely out of water. And, I don't think people truly understand what extreme dehydration does to the human mind. Thirst isn't just a discomfort anymore. It becomes a biological absolute that shuts down your higher reasoning.
The psychological toll is immense. The mathematical cruelty of dividing the last drops of water the previous morning has given way to this terrifying silence. Their lips are cracked, their tongues are swollen, their hands are shaking. They are no longer exploring. They are essentially just walking until their bodies give out.
Yeah, put yourself in Sarah's shoes for a moment. Your throat is swelling shut. Every breath of hot desert air feels like inhaling glass. But because of her scout training, she's the only one still keeping her head up. She stops on a ridge of wind-carved sand. She points.
And what do they see?
Through the blinding glare of the desert sun, they see a mirage that refuses to vanish. They see the ruined stone walls of a city, and rising out of the center of it, a massive 5-tiered step pyramid.
You'd assume finding a city would be a moment of pure joy. But when you are that close to death, hope feels less like a rescue and more like a cruel tease. Because as they stumble down the dune and into the buried streets, the reality of Cynidicea hits them.
It's empty.
Exactly. There are no wells, there are no palm trees, there is no shade. The doorways of the ruined city are just filled with packed sand and lizard tracks.
The only structure that is still intact is the Great Step Pyramid itself, rising up in these massive 20-foot tiers, with its lowest steps completely swallowed by the dunes. And sitting at the very summit of this monumental structure are 3 imposing statues.
Right, each 30 feet tall.
Yeah, 30 feet tall, just staring out over this dead city.
Those are the abandoned gods we discussed earlier. On the left, the stern, bearded man holding a balance and a lightning bolt. That's Gorm. In the middle, the winged child with snakes, a wand, and coins Zuzimigaras. And on the right, the woman holding a sheaf of wheat and a sword Metarua.
It must have been an incredible sight.
Oh, awe-inspiring. Brother Lethem looks up with his cracked lips and whispers, "Gods." And Bram, in his total pragmatic desperation, just asks, "Useful ones. That depends on whether they kept a cistern."
Marrow, true to his scholarly nature, immediately starts muttering about the tripartite divine arrangement and agricultural associations, which prompts Sarah to tell him she would sell the concept of remarkable for one single mouthful of dirty water.
She has her priorities straight.
Totally. They are driven by pure animal need at this point. So they climb the south ramp of the pyramid, not because they want to uncover history, but because people who are dying of thirst don't care about archaeology. They care about shade and the possibility of a basement.
And near the top, level with the highest tier, Sarah spots something. A secret door built seamlessly into the stone. It was brilliantly concealed once, but time and a previous traveler have ruined the secret. The stone slab is jammed half open.
And what's in the doorway?
Wedged in the doorway is the weeks-old corpse of a hobgoblin, with a massive rusted crossbow bolt sticking right out of its chest.
Now that is what you call a massive red flag.
Seriously.
Bram looks at the corpse and grunts, "Encouraging," and Sarah replies, "Someone else found the entrance. Someone else found the trap. We inherit a lesson."
This is a brilliant structural detail because it immediately sets the stakes. Cynidicea is not an empty, passive ruin that you can just wander through. It is an actively hostile environment.
It wants to kill you.
Exactly. The pyramid is a machine designed to kill visitors. They wedge the door open further with a rock, noting that the heavy crossbow mounted on the wall opposite the entrance is now empty, having done its job on the hobgoblin.
So they step inside, into the darkness of the highest tier. It is just one large square chamber. The air smells impossibly old and faintly metallic, and right away, the pyramid tries to kill them again.
Of course it does.
They find 3 large bronze cylinders rising from the floor straight to the ceiling, standing directly beneath where the 3 massive statues are positioned on the roof. Each cylinder has a small bronze door with a latch handle. Lethem goes to pull one open, and Sarah violently grabs his arm.
Good call.
She tells him, "Do not touch a handle until we know what the last person touched."
She points out the dried blood flaking on the stone floor in front of the center cylinder. This is where the paranoia of survival really sets in. They don't just open the doors, they rig ropes and poles, standing far back against the wall, completely out of patience.
So smart.
Right. They pull the handle of the left cylinder. It fires a volley of darts that shatter against the far wall. They pull the center. Nothing happens. They pull the right cylinder, and the floor directly in front of it simply drops away into a spiked pit.
Oh my God.
And then the main chamber begins to fill with invisible gas.
This isn't a theatrical trap either. There's no dramatic hissing sound, no countdown. They just start feeling incredibly dizzy. Their lungs burn, they can't breathe, and they suddenly realize the main stone door, the one they wedged open with a rock, is slowly, mechanically trying to swing shut to seal them in.
Pure panic.
Yeah, they desperately stuff rags into the ventilation holes in the baseboards, and Bram throws his entire muscular weight against the door to keep it from crushing the rock. They manage to survive, coughing up dust and gas.
Barely.
Mero wipes his eyes and rasps, "This civilization had strong feelings about visitors," and Sarah just looks at the bronze doors and says, "No, it had strong feelings about handles."
It forces them to move inward. The gas makes the main room completely untenable, so they climb into the bronze cylinders themselves. Going up the iron rungs inside, they find themselves in the hollow insides of the 30-foot statues on the roof.
And this is where they discover the mechanism of the old faith, isn't it?
Yes. They find speaking tubes, acoustic amplifiers, and heavy levers that were used to move the bronze limbs and eyes of the gods.
The priestly machinery. It is so deeply cynical. When you look at that, you realize the old religion of Cynidicea was in many ways a literal performance. They used levers to fake divine voices and movements to awe the public in the courtyard below.
Exactly. It shows a society that was manipulating its own faith, artificially engineering awe long before Zargon ever arrived. But, finding no water up in the baking bronze statues, they're forced to climb the ladders downward into the dark of the second tier. And what they find is a descent into utter absurdity.
Yeah, the pyramid is not just a dusty tomb. It is a chaotic, decaying ecosystem.
It's entirely bizarre. They pry open a door expecting a crypt, and instead they find a dry storeroom filled with a dozen musical winged sprites.
Wait, really? Sprites?
Yes. These tiny creatures are just sitting among crates of ancient, volatile fireworks, laughing and speaking this beautiful musical language like the end of the world is just a funny joke. One sprite flutters down, lands right on Bram's nose, stares at him, shouts something to the others, and they all burst into laughter.
That is amazing.
Mero says, "I think it has named you," and Bram just grunts, "Do not translate."
The sprites are whimsical, but they offer no water. They do, however, offer gossip about the other factions living in the pyramid. They talk about big blue men who stole the stern god's face and silver-smiling people.
Which is foreshadowing.
Right. But the party can't stay to decipher this. They're forced to keep moving. They encounter a room where the floor is covered in a patient, undulating carpet of flesh-dissolving green slime.
Nasty stuff.
They find pale, blind geckos the size of dogs feeding on a corpse. They find a treasure room guarded by giant, aggressive killer bees protecting not just gold, but magically potent healing honey.
Let's talk about the psychology here, because this is where the hierarchy of needs completely takes over.
Yeah.
They walk past piles of ancient Cynidician coins. They see gemstones scattered on the floor, and they just don't care.
They ignore it all.
They literally step over gold to look for a damp corner. Mero stops complaining because he doesn't have the moisture in his mouth to physically speak. Bram slows down, his immense strength sapped. Sarah's thirst becomes a physical, screaming voice in her head.
Wow.
In this pyramid, gold means absolutely nothing. Food and water are the ultimate singular currency.
When civilization strips away, wealth is revealed as an illusion agreed upon by comfortable people. Driven purely by this desperate biological need for hydration, they stumble blindly deeper into the tier, into the domain of the first surviving faction.
Brotherhood.
Right. They open a heavy wooden door, bracing for another monster, and instead they find bunk beds, weapon racks, clean equipment, and most importantly, heavy leather water skins. And sitting at a table are 5 men in chainmail, wearing blue tunics and golden masks forged in the likeness of the stern, bearded god Gorm. The party is just stunned. The leader, a tall, imposing older man, stands up, raises his hand, and says, "I am Candlelight, Grand Master of the Brotherhood of Gorm. You are either thieves, spies, mad wanderers, or a sign."
Quite the greeting.
And Sarah, literally dying on her feet, just stares at the water skins and says, "May we be thirsty first and suspicious afterward."
And Candlelight, representing the god of justice, shows mercy. He hands them the water. This is a brilliant narrative moment because water completely changes the moral structure of a conversation.
How so?
Before drinking, Bram would have fought to the death just for the chance to loot the room. After drinking, as the water hits his system, his rational brain re-engages, and he remembers that he shouldn't trust masked men living in a buried pyramid. Candlelight actually respects that suspicion.
So we meet the Brotherhood of Gorm. Candlelight explains their philosophy, and it's fascinating. They believe they are the spine of Cynidicea. They value justice, strict discipline, and martial force.
Very rigid.
Exactly. They look at this buried, ruined city not as a corpse, but as a sick patient. They believe that with enough force and discipline, they can cure the city, eradicate the monsters, and restore it to its former glory.
But there is a massive catch. Candlelight freely admits they hate the Magi of Usamigurs, and they deeply mistrust the warrior maidens of Madarua.
The other factions.
Right. Brother Lethan, functioning as the diplomatic cleric, asks the obvious question. He says, the old gods must stand together against Zargon. Do they? And Candlelight simply answers no.
Wow, just blunt.
That blunt honesty actually wins the party over more than the water did. Candlelight warns them that the pyramid is stratified like a diseased country. Factions up top, the royal dead below, and at the very bottom, in the dark, Zargon.
The party leaves the Brotherhood Sanctuary, their thirst finally quenched, and they move down a corridor painted entirely black, studded with tiny white lights like an underground night sky. They are walking into the territory of the Magi of Usamigureth.
The silver-smiling people.
Right. Behind an iron door marked with a silver star, they find 13 figures draped in rainbow-colored robes, all wearing silver masks of the smiling, winged child.
Their leader is Auriga Sarkinos. He is stout, bright-voiced, and overwhelmingly suspiciously welcoming. He calls them wanderers from the sun and immediately declares that they will be very useful.
Which is terrifying to hear.
It immediately sets off every alarm bell in Sarah's head. The Magi are pragmatic to a fault. When the party arrives, the Magi are actively battling giant, armor-plated oil beetles just to protect their food stores. Auriga explains their worldview, which is the polar opposite of Gorm's rigid martial discipline. If Gorm breaks doors, Usamigureth finds the hinges.
I love that distinction. Auriga believes in cunning, magic, necessary theft, and surviving powers that are too large to confront directly. He tries to recruit the party right on the spot, offering them silver masks and access to secret arcane knowledge.
And how does Bram react?
Bram looks at him, crossing his massive arms, and asks, "Does everyone here recruit travelers who just crawled out of the desert?" Auriga smiles behind his silver mask and says, "Only the visionary."
It's deeply unsettling. Brother Lethan immediately mistrusts him, sensing a profound, hidden ambition beneath all those pleasantries. But Sarah pragmatically notes that Auriga is more useful than he is safe. They trade some information for supplies and move on, descending further into the factional politics of the pyramid.
Next, they encounter the warrior maidens of Madarua, and the vibe shifts completely. There are no pleasantries here. They are announced by warning chimes triggered by hidden weight plates in the floor.
No sneaking up on them.
No way. They walk under an archway bristling with spears into a shrine that is unnervingly clean white drapes, green carpet, burning incense. Waiting for them is Pandora, the champion of Madarua, standing with 10 warriors in polished bronze masks. Pandora is heavily scarred, incredibly tall, and makes absolutely zero effort to appear welcoming.
She doesn't greet them. She interrogates them. Gorm sent you. Usamigureth bought you. Zargon marked you. And when Bram grips his axe and says, "Not yet," Pandora actually laughs. It's a harsh, dangerous laugh.
She respects strength.
Totally. The maidens explain their philosophy, which is tied to the harsh reality of the seasons in war. They believe in birth, death, and the absolute bloody duty to cut away the rot so that new things can grow. They find Gorm too rigid to adapt, Usamigureth too slippery to trust, and Zargon's priests completely obscene.
This is where the political landscape of the pyramid really crystallizes. Brother Lethan looks at Pandora and asks, "Can the three faiths ever unite?" Pandora says yes. Lethan asks when, and Pandora replies, "When each of the other two admits we are right."
The political structure of the pyramid is essentially a pressure cooker with a broken release valve. The factions of the steam pushing aggressively against each other, but the physical reality of Zargon acting as a lid means none of them can escape. They're trapped in a perpetual stalemate.
But wait, why don't they just team up? If they all hate Zargon and they all want to restore Cynidicea, logic dictates that they pool their fighters, their magic, and their resources. They could probably march down there and win. Why sit in separate rooms hoarding supplies while the city rots beneath them?
Because of the tragic flaw of survival. It is a brilliant paradox. You see, Cynidicea did not survive the centuries because it was strong or flexible or cooperative. It survived because no single part of it ever entirely agreed to die.
Oh, wow.
That sheer, blinding stubbornness is what kept the factions alive in the dark when they should have starved. But that exact same stubbornness is what keeps them fractured now. They would rather rule the ashes of their own ideology than compromise to save the city.
That is incredibly tragic. They are prisoners of their own resilience. And so, realizing that the upper tiers are locked in a political stalemate that won't help them escape, our party seeks a way further down. They descend to the fourth tier, and this is where history literally bites back. This is the realm of the royal dead.
The fourth tier belongs to the dead who still have opinions. The transition from the faction-held upper levels to the tombs is stark. The air grows incredibly cold. The first warning they get is entirely supernatural.
The ghosts, right.
Yeah. As they walk down a grand corridor, the air shimmers, and the terrifying translucent apparitions of King Alexander and Queen Zenobia manifest right in front of them. They are pale as moonlight underwater, dressed in ancient spectral finery.
The ghost of Alexander raises a hand, and his voice echoes in their skulls, warning them that the curse of the king will overtake them. Zenobia tells them to turn back, that only death awaits them. It is a profound, chilling moment.
Really sets the tone.
Definitely. The accounts say the warning didn't just register in their ears, it passed through their lungs and into their legs, physically sapping their courage. Marrow nearly drops his staff and runs. Brother Lethan has to grip his holy symbol and whisper a desperate prayer just to keep their boots glued to the floor. The haunts eventually fade into mist, but the tombs remain.
And what they find in these tombs is a horrific lesson in entropy. These were the burial chambers of the great and the useful nobles, high priests, ladies-in-waiting, and slaves killed to serve in the afterlife. The walls are painted with beautiful, pristine scenes of their lives. But the physical reality of the rooms is grotesque. The dead were buried to be honored, but over the centuries they have been reduced to mere meat for scavengers.
It is a chaotic gauntlet. In one room, they open a door to find massive white apes squatting beside a nobleman's sarcophagus. The apes are furiously pounding the floor with their fists, creating this deafening, rhythmic booming until Bram literally beats them back with his shield.
Pure chaos.
In another room, they pry open a heavy stone coffin, and instead of a mummy, a swarm of giant shrews bursts out, gnawing at their ankles. Marrow, trying to keep his sanity by categorizing the horror, dubs the shrews small administrative disasters.
I mean, the degradation of the elite is complete. In the high priest's chamber, they find a pack of ghouls happily tearing apart mummified bodies. The ghouls are throwing aside priceless emeralds and gold necklaces as if wealth is just an annoying wrapper around the meat they actually want to eat.
That's a great image.
Lethan tries to turn the ghouls with his faith, holding up his holy symbol, but these undead just laugh with their broken mouths, completely unbothered by a modern god, until Bram's axe physically ends the debate.
But the embalming room is where it gets truly terrifying. They walk into a chamber filled with ceramic jars and stone tables. The air smells like heavy spices and old dust. And then 5 shadows, literal, strength-sapping silhouettes detached from any body, slide out from the
The
darkness.
shadows are the worst.
One of them reaches out and touches Sarah's arm, and the mechanics of this are terrifying. It doesn't cut her, it just drains her life force. Her strength vanishes so fast, her fingers go numb, and she drops her knife.
They don't even try to fight. They just scream commands. Fire here, back, door, run. As we've seen before, sometimes victory isn't about steel or magic. Sometimes victory is just successfully leaving a room and continuing to be alive.
True survival.
They slam the door on the shadows only to stumble into the true horror of the tier, the royal undead themselves.
Yes, Queen Zenobia did not sleep cleanly. They find her true tomb, heavily sealed, and as they enter, she rises from her slab as a white. She still wears her bright jeweled crown on her dead brow, wielding a scepter she has forgotten is actually a magic wand.
A deadly fight.
The fight is brutal and desperate. Bram swings his heavy axe, but the mundane steel just glances off her unnaturally tough flesh. He has to drop it and draw a silver dagger he bought from the Magi. Lethan grips his holy symbol so hard his hand bleeds, chanting prayers.
And Sarah.
Sarah, being Sarah, aims straight for the head. She believes that if something is going to murder her, it should do so with fewer shiny accessories.
Classic Sarah. They manage to strike her down, scattering her bones, but the silence afterward feels less like peace and more like an eviction. And King Alexander is worse. His tomb is guarded by a banshee, a translucent figure with a dark, gaping mouth and red eyes.
The whale. Right.
Yeah, its wail fills the chamber like winter poured from a jar. It's a sound that literally stops the heart. They don't even attempt to fight it. They just slam the heavy stone door shut and lean against it, panting, while the wail screeps against the stone on the other side.
Which brings us to the false tomb, which is an absolute masterpiece of ancient spite. They enter a room with 2 glittering sarcophagi, surrounded by open chests of coins, gems, and heavy gold jewelry. It looks like the ultimate treasure hoard.
But it's a trick.
Completely. Dwarven caution and Sarah's probing knife reveal the truth. The gold bars are just painted lead, the giant rubies are carved glass, the coins are counterfeit, and the corpses inside the fancy sarcophagi are just royal slaves dressed up in cheap finery.
This reveals the sheer, unadulterated contempt the ancient Cynidices had for grave robbers. They didn't just want to kill intruders, they wanted to humiliate them. They weaponized both traps and jokes. In the next room, which is the Jester's tomb, a painted, spring-loaded head literally bursts out of the coffin on a rusted wire just to mock them as they jump back in terror.
And it culminates in the master thief's burial trap. They trigger a pressure plate, and a massive 10-foot-wide rolling stone boulder drops from the ceiling and chases them down a sloping corridor. They barely escape. Bram shoves Marrow through a doorway, Lethen loses a sandal scrambling out of the way, and Cira dives hard enough to strip the skin from her palms on the rough stone.
Just by the skin of their teeth.
The boulder crashes past them and wedges itself in a corner with a deafening thud, and Marrow, covered in dust, just starts laughing. He realizes the awful truth. They are the punchline to a dead civilization's joke.
Exhausted, battered, and feeling completely mocked by history, the party descends to the fifth tier. And this is where the dust and the dead give way to signs of recent sinister life. They are now deep beneath the sand, breathing air borrowed from the dead, and the atmosphere changes entirely.
The fifth tier is where the pyramid transitions from a quiet tomb to an active residence. They start seeing muddy footprints, they find chests that have been recently moved, they smell fresh wine and roasting meat, and the encounters become increasingly surreal.
Oh, very surreal.
They open a storeroom expecting guards, and instead find 3 enormous ogres sullenly eating ceremonial wax candles, chewing with the solemn disgust of creatures who refuse to admit they made a mistake in their diet. Bram just quietly closes the door.
Cira looks at him and asks, "We need that room." And Bram replies, "I have never needed a room less."
Oof, smart man.
In another room, they find a beautiful, massive desert tapestry depicting a hunting scene. Sarah, always observant, notices that the tapestry doesn't ripple in the draft from the open door, and then tapestry notices Sarah noticing it.
The polymorph.
It is a polymorph, yes, a shape-shifting monster that mimics objects. The flat-woven wall subtly bulges, turning into a horrific mass of claws, folds, and teeth.
It peels off the wall and attacks. Bram hits it with a heavy wooden chair, smashing it into splinters. Marrow, panicking, accidentally casts a light spell instead of an attack spell, blinding everyone for a second. Sarah furiously slashes at it with her knife until it recoils into a shapeless, bleeding lump. They grab a small chest in the room and run, forever traumatized by interior decor.
But the narrative takes a sharp, profound emotional turn when they find an abandoned bedroom. The room is thick with dust, but draped over a wooden chair is an ancient, pristine white robe sitting next to a wooden holy symbol carved in the shape of 2 intertwined snakes.
The symbol of Zimagaras.
Exactly. Marrow recognizes the symbol and the name from a scrap of parchment they found earlier, Demetrius, an elder of the Magi of Eusimigaros. Brother Lethen, compelled by a strange reverence, reaches out and touches the white fabric.
And that's when it happens.
Instantly, his body goes rigid, his eyes change, deepening in color. His voice acquires an unnatural age at the edges. He is possessed by the spirit of Demetrius.
It is such a tense, terrifying moment. Sarah instantly draws her knife and Bram raises his shield, ready to bash their friend's head in to save him. But the possession isn't a mindless monster taking control. Demetrius speaks through Lethen's mouth and calmly, rationally explains his purpose. He says, "My brother Darius serves Zargon. I died before I killed him. That was an error I have had years to reconsider."
The psychology of the sibling rivalry driving this is fascinating. Demetrius was murdered by his own brother, Darius, who sold his soul and his humanity to the monster Zargon for power. Demetrius' spirit has been waiting in that robe for years. He didn't move on to the afterlife. His hatred anchored him to the fabric, just waiting for a vessel strong enough to carry him to revenge.
I love the dark humor here, too. Sarah asks the entity if Lethen objects to being possessed. Demetrius pauses, feeling Lethen's mind, and says he objects to the theology. Lethen is philosophically opposed to being a meat puppet for a ghost, but he is voluntarily allowing the possession because they share a common enemy. He's letting the ghost drive.
So, guided by the dead brother piloting their friend, the party runs a bizarre, violent gauntlet toward Darius' sanctum. They push through a kitchen where giant rock pythons are coiled around the corpse of a woman wearing a rabbit mask.
Pythons in the kitchen.
Bram gets completely wrapped up and crushed by a python, his ribs creaking, while Sarah furiously saws its head off with her blade.
They pass through a living room guarded by living iron statues. And these aren't just heavy, they're highly magnetic. As soon as they enter, the statues pull their metal weapons right out of their hands. Bram loses his beloved axe. Sarah's knife flies through the air and sticks to a statue's chest.
Disarmed instantly.
They only survive because Marrow remembers the ancient fireworks they looted from the sprites. He uses them as makeshift flashbangs, filling the room with blinding sparks and thick smoke, allowing them to scramble through the door.
They stagger into a grand entry hall that has been entirely buried by sand pouring in from the outside ruins. The walls here are covered in magnificent, sweeping history mosaics. They depict primitive worship, the engineering of the city, the horrific discovery of Zargon, and the societal descent into masked madness.
The whole history on the walls.
But then the mosaics just abruptly stop. There is a massive blank wall, blank space left for a future that never arrived. Brother Lethan, speaking with Demetrius' ancient wisdom, touches the blank stone and notes that perhaps the walls are simply waiting to see if there will be a future at all.
They push forward and find a massive underground chapel. It's guarded by two opportunistic werefoxes wearing bronze fox masks. But the werefoxes don't attack. They actually point the party toward the secret door, not out of kindness, but out of sheer, unadulterated terror of Darius.
He must be terrifying.
And in this chapel, they find something miraculous. Real, flowing water from underground fountains. Bram drops to his knees and fills every skin they have, and Marrow actually cries a little from the pure relief of it.
As they push deeper into the fifth tier, the pyramid stops feeling like a physical structure and starts feeling like a fevered mind. The descent into madness is palpable. They pass an acid pool with a stone box slowly sinking into bubbling, corrosive death.
Just surreal.
They look through the clear, gelatinous body of a cube monster, literally seeing the bones floating inside its invisible acidic walls, just to map the room behind it. They find a massive, drunken owlbear passed out among smashed wine casks. They walk past a nightmare lobby full of masked Cynidicians screaming at invisible horrors.
And then the gambling room. This is where the cognitive dissonance of Cynidicea hits its peak. They enter a grand room full of masked citizens playing dice, cards, and a spinning wheel of fortune. Silver and gold are changing hands.
Nothing is wrong.
They invite the party to play with complete seriousness, as if their entire civilization hadn't ended in fire and madness centuries ago. Marrow, being the academic, almost sits down to observe the social ritual, but Sarah roughly yanks him back by his collar. Demetrius walks straight to the south wall, places Lethan's hand against a hidden seam in the stone, and the secret door opens.
They finally confront Darius. He is waiting in his sanctum with armed hobgoblin guards and his own fanatic masked followers. Darius has the chillingly calm demeanor of a man who gave his conscience to a monster a long time ago.
The ultimate showdown.
He looks at his dead brother, looking back at him through Lethan's eyes, and says, "You took your time." Demetrius just smiles a cold, borrowed smile and replies, "I was dead."
The emotional climax is just brutal. It is less a tactical battle and more a bitter family inheritance dispute conducted with heavy maces, arcane magic, and hobgoblin blades, all while the masked gamblers in the next room panic and scream.
A messy fight.
Darius tries to magically silence Marrow, wrapping his throat in an invisible vice. Demetrius unleashes the stored necrotic fury of a murdered priest, blasting Darius's guards. Bram holds the line, taking blows until his shield literally bends inward.
And Sarah.
Sarah goes low. Because, as she notes, evil clerics always prepare magical wards for grand heroes and flashy spells, but they often forget to watch out for a practical, dirty knife strike to the ribs. She slips under Darius's guard and buries her blade right in his side.
Darius falls, gasping, his dark magic unraveling. Demetrius stands over his brother's bleeding body, takes one long, final breath of borrowed air, and simply relinquishes his hold. Brother Lethan collapses to his knees, gasping, and the white robe draped over his arm instantly crumbles to fine gray dust.
Wow.
Lethan wakes up, his eye is his own again, looks at the carnage, and asks, "Did we win?" Sarah looks at the dead brother, the panicking gamblers peeking through the door, and thinks of the blank history mosaics. She says, "No, but we removed one argument."
It's a profound realization that killing a bad man doesn't instantly fix a broken world. With Darius dead, they search the room and find a heavy iron trapdoor concealed under a rug. And this takes us to the true secret of Cynidicea.
The underground city.
The party pries it open and descends a sloping stone passage. The air gets incredibly cold and damp. It smells like fungus, wood smoke, and old, stagnant water. And then, echoing in the dark, they hear the rhythmic splashing sound of oars.
The revelation is breathtaking. They step out of the claustrophobic passage and find themselves standing on a stone ledge, staring out at a vast black underground lake. Above them is a cavern roof lost in total darkness. But below, stretching out into the gloom, is an entire subterranean world.
It's just massive.
There are wooden docks, little boats with flickering lanterns, massive forests of giant glowing mushrooms, and fenced pens holding pale, blind, underground animals.
And the city itself. The survivors didn't just hide. They built grand streets using cracked marble columns and heavy stones stolen from the surface ruins. There is an actual Alexander Way and a Zenobia Street down here in the dark.
But the people.
The people are deeply unsettling. They're pale, white-haired, and absolutely everyone is wearing elaborate masks. Birds, camels, wolves, foxes.
They are completely detached from reality. They are acting out generations-long fever dreams to cope with the trauma of living beneath a monster. A woman in a beautifully painted bird mask walks up, hands Meryl some scented powder, and walks away without saying a single word.
So weird.
6 people in camel masks zigzag down the street in a bizarre procession for absolutely no reason. A man in a wolf mask drops to all fours and howls at Bram. And Bram, too tired to care, just howls back, which somehow completely satisfies the man. It is a society that has institutionalized its own insanity.
The geography of power down here is a physical manifestation of their fractured minds. The 3 old factions, Gorm, Usamigaras, and Metarua, all have heavily fortified strongholds built into the cavern walls. Across the Black Lake is the Island of Death, filled with ancient crumbling arches, and the far cliffs are swarming with hostile goblin caves.
And above it all,
Towering above absolutely everything, dominating the cavern, is the Temple of Zargon.
the temple is the dark heart of the underground city. It has barred cells where prisoners are held, just waiting to be fed downward into the deepest dark. Its services aren't well attended by the general populace, but as the records show, power doesn't need popularity. It only needs fear, habit, and the keys to the doors beneath everyone's feet.
The party starts talking to the locals, trading supplies and gathering information, and they learn a terrible mechanical truth about the god they are trying to kill. You cannot simply stab Zargon to death.
Not that simple.
You can cut its flesh, you can crush its tentacles, but its biology is an anomaly. It will always regenerate, entirely and rapidly from its singular black horn.
It is a cycle of eternal terror. To permanently end Zargon, the monster must be physically defeated, the horn must be severed from its body, and then the horn must be carried across the treacherous wasteland of the cavern and cast into the Eye of Zargon, a bubbling volcanic lava pit hidden deep in the caves.
And of course, the 3 factions refuse to work together to accomplish this. Gorm would march in, fight honorably, and die proudly. Usamigaras would scheme, look for an angle, and ultimately betray everyone. Matarua would cut a bloody path but lack the sustained numbers to finish the job.
The stalemate again?
So Sarah, our brilliant, pragmatic scout, looks at this political mess and brokers a deeply cynical bargain.
It is masterful negotiation. She realizes she can never unite them in brotherhood, so she unites them in blame. She calls a council and tells them Gorm will provide the heavy shields and armor. Matarua will provide the weapons and the fighters. Usamigaras will provide the healing magic and the maps.
And what do?
The outsiders, Sarah, Bram, Mamero, and Lethan, will go down and do the actual dirty work of fighting the Gon. If they succeed, Cynidicea is free, and the factions can take the credit. If they die, the factions can just blame the outsiders and each other, maintaining their perfect, comfortable stalemate.
The faction leaders absolutely love this idea because it requires zero compromise on their core beliefs. They get to maintain their ideological purity while outsourcing the actual risk. So, armed with a coalition of deeply uncooperative faction soldiers, the party begins the descent into the lowest levels, into Zargon's true lair.
The descent through the lowest tiers is a compressed, claustrophobic nightmare. They're pushing deep into the bedrock now. And the thematic cruelty of these lower floors is incredible.
The contrast is wild.
The walls are painted with beautiful, serene murals depicting the orderly journey of the spirit in the afterlife. Scenes of quiet mourning, elegant funerals, and golden boats sailing toward the light. But the physical reality of the rooms is populated by actual, chaotic death.
They fight acidic black puddings that are slowly dissolving the ancient slave quarters. They find shambling mummies aggressively guarding the painted mourning scenes. Giant blood-sucking weasels are nesting right beneath a beautiful painting of a funeral procession.
It's relentless.
They are hunted by displacer beasts, creatures that mathematically bend light so they appear to be several feet away from their actual physical location, making them almost impossible to hit. They find trolls that regenerate their limbs by grave sites.
It's an absolute gauntlet. They encounter hellhounds breathing fire and demanding coin passage. They find a trapped genie making desperate, deceptive bargains in a sealed jar. A vampire lurks in the shadows near a painted boat of light. A chimera with 3 heads guards Madurua's judgment hall.
So many monsters.
They fight a bone golem, a massive construct of mismatched skeletons that moves with this horrific, creaking, unnatural physics. And Marrow, in a moment of pure clumsiness, sneezes and accidentally wakes up a massive blue dragon resting in a cavernous vault.
A dragon?
They don't even try to kill the dragon. They run, they bargain, they hide behind pillars while lightning breath scorches the walls. But the toll of this descent is incredibly heavy. They lose several of the faction members along the way. 2 warriors of Gorm are drained of life by wraiths. A Magus of Usamigaris dies to his own cleverness, triggering a trap he thought he disabled.
Brutal.
A maiden of Madurua is incinerated by the dragon's lightning. And as the bodies fall, the ideological differences between the blue tunics, the silver masks, and the bronze masks are completely stripped away. By the end of the descent, they aren't factions anymore. They are just desperate, bleeding survivors.
And then they reach the final trap. A long, sloping corridor painted with glowing spirits boarding a beautiful winged boat of golden light. Mara looks at the artistry and whispers, "It's beautiful." And Sarah, noticing the complete lack of dust on the floor, replies, "Educational," right as the stone floor gives way.
The slide.
It turns into a slick, frictionless stone slide, plunging them directly into the pitch-black abyss.
They slide uncontrollably down into the dark and crash into a massive chamber that is knee-deep in foul-smelling slime and crushed centuries-old bones. The smell of rot and stagnant water is overwhelming. They struggle to their feet, and then the entire north wall seems to rustle and shift. The 15-foot lizard-headed god rises, Zargon.
The sheer, visceral horror of this moment is paralyzing. It drags its immense, bloated bulk forward on 12 wet, muscular tentacles. Its talons flex, scraping the stone. The single, unblinking red eye under the massive black horn stares them down. And the most terrifying part, it doesn't roar. It doesn't speak.
No bargaining with it.
A god that speaks can be debated with. A tyrant can be hated. Zargon is just pure, mindless appetite given physical architecture.
The initial combat is a total disorganized disaster. The surviving faction fighters charge with their spears and swords and are just brutally swatted aside like flies by the tentacles.
Yeah.
Weapons and magic do absolutely nothing. Bram buries his axe into a tentacle, but the flesh just sickeningly knits back together around the blade.
Regenerating instantly.
Bram drives his heavy shield into a claw, and the shield is simply ripped from his arm. Merrill panics so badly he forgets all his offensive spells, uses a wand to detect traps, and screams, "The entire room is a trap."
Which is objectively funny in hindsight, but completely unhelpful in the moment. It is Brother Lethan who shifts the paradigm. He remembers the mechanical truth they learned in the city. The battle shifts from killing the body to taking the horn. He shouts to the party over the chaos that a thing that can regenerate doesn't guard its limbs. It guards its beginning.
So they do the unthinkable. They stop trying to stab its mass, and they start trying to climb it. It is a desperate, insane, incredibly dangerous maneuver. Bram and Pandora throw their combined weight to pin down one of the massive tentacles against the stone.
Pinning it down.
Riga, the Magus, uses his magic to cast an illusion of a second blazing sun right in front of the creature's face to blind and distract the giant red eye. And Sarah physically climbs the slime-covered, thrashing body of the god.
It is a harrowing climb. She slips on the slime. She nearly gets her leg crushed between 2 shifting plates of muscle, but Bram violently cuts her free. She scrambles up the neck. She reaches the head. She grabs the horn. It is warm to the touch, heavily ridged, and feels sickeningly alive. She strikes it with a dead king's sword she looted earlier, but the steel blade just chips against the dark material.
Zargon finally reacts to the threat. It screams, a soundless, vibrating shriek that shakes the dust from the ceiling. Lethan steps up, climbs Bram's back, and smashes the base of the horn with a heavy mace that has been multi-blessed by all 3 altars of the factions. The combined faith actually cracks the base of the horn.
Crack.
And then Bram throws Skara a heavy, blunt stonemason's hammer they looted from the tomb of the Master Thief, because sometimes complex theology and immortal monsters require a direct physical hammer. Smara winds up, bracing her boots against the lizard scales, and strikes the crack. Once. twice, and on the third blow, the black horn shatters and breaks free.
The reaction is instantaneous and violently chaotic. Zargon collapses into a thrashing, formless mass of meat and slime. It isn't entirely dead, but it has lost its anchor to reality. The severed horn in Sarah's hands is heavy and twitches like a dark root torn from the soil.
They have to move.
Driven by pure, unadulterated terror, the surviving party doesn't stay to watch. They scramble blindly back up the slick slide, boosting each other up to escape the chamber.
But the ordeal isn't over. They have the horn, but the horn is unnaturally, impossibly heavy. It actively resists being carried, pulling toward the ground. And they still have to slog through the underground wasteland to destroy it.
They journey back across the Black Lake and into this hellish, geothermally active landscape of steam vents, jagged stalagmites, and bubbling mud. And arrayed against them are the desperate, fanatical forces of Zargon. Panicked priests who know their power is fading, fools and swarms of cavern goblins.
And the factions are still fighting.
Yes. Even now, with the finish line quite literally in sight, the three factions are still bickering and arguing about tactics. Gorm wants a shield wall. Metarua wants a flanking charge. Usamigars wants to hide.
So our heroes realize they can't win a grand military battle with a dysfunctional army. So they cheat. It's the grand deception. Mero uses his wand of illusion to create a dozen fake floating horns moving in different directions.
Brilliant.
Auriga immediately, predictably, claims the illusion was his own brilliant idea. Pandora leads a loud decoy charge in the completely wrong direction to draw the Tholes away. And Candlelight stands on a high rock and loudly preaches the justice of Gorm purely to distract the goblin archers.
It is a beautiful, chaotic culmination of their combined skills. Brahm is physically carrying Sarah at this point because the horn is literally trying to drag her down to the ground, increasing its gravity. They finally, exhausted and bleeding, reach the edge of the lava pit, the glowing, superheated red eye of Zargon.
Brother Lithan looks at the bubbling lava, the heat blistering their faces. He looks at Sarah and asks, if this fails, if it doesn't die. Sarah looks back over her shoulder. She sees the absurd, tragic, dreaming city of Cynidicea in the distance. She sees the factions still arguing even as they fight. And she simply replies, then we do something else.
And she throws it.
And they hurl the heavy black horn into the magma.
And here is the profound strangeness of the climax. There is no massive Hollywood explosion. There is no shockwave that knocks them off their feet. After centuries of terror, the root of the false god just hisses like water on a hot stone and melts away. Deep below the pyramid, they hear a faint, distant scream from a creature without a mouth, and the earth trembles slightly. And that is it. The silent, anticlimactic end of a god.
Zargon is gone. The horn is destroyed. But the reality of history is that trauma does not vanish overnight just because the monster is dead. The destruction of Zargon does not instantly heal Cynidicea.
Right. They don't go back to the city and find everyone cured. The dreamers are still walking the streets in their animal masks, lost in their narcotic haze. The factions are still bickering over who gets to sit on the throne and dictate the rebuilding process.
Old habits die hard.
The Temple of Zargon isn't empty. Corrupt priests don't give up their political power just because their god evaporated. The city must undergo the incredibly painful, slow, generational process of actually waking up.
Weeks later, our surviving party finally climbs out of the secret door at the top of the pyramid. They step out into the blinding, painful, beautiful desert sun. Mero immediately sits down in the sand, pulls out his parchment, and starts writing everything down to prove he survived.
The scholar to the end.
Brem drinks water from his canteen, but he doesn't gulp it. He drinks it with a newfound religious reverence. Lithan looks up at the three giant statues of Gorm, Usmigaras, and Metarua staring out over the waste. He says, justice, cunning, and the seasons, they endure.
But Sarah, our ever-pragmatic scout who kept them alive, has the ultimate takeaway. She looks out over the empty dunes, shakes her head, and corrects the cleric. She says the true gods of survival aren't justice or seasons. The true gods are water, doors, and not touching handles.
It is the perfect practical distillation of their nightmare. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. The step pyramid of Cynidicea is still out there, buried under the shifting sands. There is still ancient treasure in the dark. There is still fresh water flowing from the underground lake. But if you ever find yourself wandering in the dark and a voice offers you absolute certainty, a simple solution to all your complex fears, ask first what it eats.